Osborne Magic Treehouse 15th. Viking ships at sunrise. 6. The Vikings are coming. Annie, Jack cried. Vikings. Annie looked out the treehouse window. Vikings? They're headed straight for the island, said Jack. He turned back to the stone steps. Where are you going? Cried Annie. To warn the monks, Jack said. I'll come too, cried Annie. She scrambled out of the treehouse. Hurry, said Jack. Jack didn't even use the rope. He pulled himself up the steep steps with his hands. As Jack and Annie climbed up the face of the cliff, clouds began to cover the sun. When they reached the top, a fog had almost hidden the serpent ships. Run, cried Annie. The fog blanketed the whole island. Jack and Annie could barely see the path to the monastery. When they arrived at the gate, the misty white world was silent. Vikings, Jack cried. Vikings. The monks are still in church, said Annie. She yanked the bell rope. Dong, dong. Jack and Annie watched as Brother Patrick and the other monks ran out of the church. The Vikings are coming, Jack shouted. Brother Patrick's rosy face turned white. Make haste, he said to the other monks. Gather the books and hide. The monks ran into the library. Brother Patrick turned to Jack and Annie. We have a secret hiding place, a cave on the other side of the island, he said. You can come with us, but I'm not certain you will be safe. Don't worry, said Jack. We're going to try to go home. Do not use the steps, Brother Patrick said. The Vikings will climb them. Then how do we get down? Said Jack. Go that way, said Brother Patrick, pointing. At the cliff's edge are 2 large rocks. A path between those rocks will take you down to the shore. Then you can walk around to your boat. Thanks, said Annie. Be careful, said Brother Patrick. He hurried inside the library. Wait, came a thin voice as Jack and Annie turned to run. It was Brother Michael. He hobbled over to them, holding out his book of Irish tales. Take it, he said. Are you sure? Jack asked. He knew it was Brother Michael's life's work. Please, said Brother Michael. It is better that the world should have some of it than none at all, just in case. We'll take good care of it, said Jack. He gently placed the jeweled book in his leather bag. Good luck, said Annie. Annie and Jack waved goodbye to the old man. Then they raced to the rocks that Brother Patrick had told them about. 7. Fog-bound. At the rocks, the seagulls still screeched. Jack could barely see the steep path leading down into the fog. Go slowly, Jack whispered to Annie as they started down. Whoops, said Annie. She slipped and fell forward, bumping into Jack. My foot got caught in my stupid dress. Shh, said Jack. He held on to Annie. They listened as pebbles and rocks rolled down the cliff. Jack took a deep breath. We've got to watch out for Vikings, too, he whispered. They started down the steep path again. They went one step at a time. The sound of the waves against the rocks grew louder. Finally, they stepped down onto a flat strip of pebbles. Where are we? Whispered Annie. I don't know, said Jack. Oh, look, said Annie. She pointed to the shoreline. Through the fog rose the serpent prows of the Viking ships. Jack and Annie crept closer to the ships. Their sails were down. Each ship had been tied to a tall, jagged rock. They seemed deserted as they bobbed in the shallow waves. Jack really wanted to check out the ships, but he was afraid of wasting time. We'd better find the treehouse, he said to Annie. They crept away from the 3 Viking ships. Suddenly, they both froze. Through the mist, they saw a group of Viking warriors. The Vikings were looking at the top of the cliff. Their long yellow hair hung down from beneath their iron helmets. They carried round wooden shields and swords and axes. It looks like they're planning to climb the cliff, whispered Annie. We need to hide until they go, whispered Jack. Then we can look for the treehouse. Let's hide in a ship, said Annie. Good idea, said Jack. They crept back to where the ships were tied. Jack was happy to see that the sides of the smallest ship were very low. They would easily be able to climb over them. You go first, said Annie. Jack waded through the shallow water. It was cold. He reached the ship and grabbed one side. He pushed himself up and onto the ship's deck. The ship jerked forward. Jack looked at the shore. It was now 30 feet away. The ship's anchoring rope was pulled tight. The serpent prow bobbed up and down with the waves. The fog and the movement of the ship made Jack feel as if he was in a dream. For a moment, he forgot to be scared of the Vikings. This is so cool, he called. Come on, Annie. Annie started to wade out to the ship. Suddenly, she disappeared. Annie? Called Jack. Her head popped out of the water. She splashed with her arms. It's deep, she gasped. My dress, too heavy. Use the rope, called Jack. Like when we climbed the stairs. Annie grabbed the rope that stretched from ship to shore. It held her weight as she began inching along it. Hold on tight, cried Jack. I am, gasped Annie. She kept going, hand over hand along the rope toward the ship. When Annie got close to the ship, Jack reached out to help her. As he pulled her in, the side of the ship dipped down. Then the rope went slack, and the Viking ship slid out to sea. 8. Lost at sea. Annie fell to the deck of the ship. Jack pulled the rope out of the water. The end of it was still tied in a loop. What happened? Asked Annie. We're heading out to sea, said Jack. I guess all the pulling lifted the rope off the rock. Annie sat up and looked at the misty whiteness. I can't see the island, she said. I can't see anything, said Jack. Annie looked at Jack. Do you think this is our darkest hour? She asked. I don't know, said Jack. Maybe the book will help. He pulled out their research book. He found a picture of a Viking ship. He read the caption aloud. Viking warships were the best ships of their times. When there was no wind, the crew would take down the sails and row with oars. The smallest ships had 4 rowers, and the largest had as many as 32. Rowers sat on boxes that stored their belongings. Great, said Annie, jumping up. This isn't our darkest hour. Why do you say that? Asked Jack. There's still hope, said Annie. We can row to the other side of the island and find the treehouse. Are you nuts? Said Jack. Please, Jack, said Annie. Can we just try? She grabbed one of the oars. She could barely lift it. Forget it, Annie, said Jack. It takes 4 big Viking guys to row this thing. You're too little. I'm too little. Come on, Jack. Just try, said Annie. You get an oar, too. We'll sit on boxes across from each other. Oh, brother, said Jack. Annie dragged her long oar over to a storage box. I'm not doing this alone, she said. Jack groaned. Then he dragged an oar to the box across from Annie. Cool, said Annie. She peered into a storage box. Look, one for each of us. She lifted out 2 small Viking helmets. Maybe these were made for Viking kids who sometimes ride in this ship, said Annie. Maybe, said Jack. He hadn't thought of Vikings as real people before, people with families and little kids. Annie pulled off her scarf and put a helmet on her head. Now I feel like a Viking, too, she said. I bet it will help me row. She handed Jack a helmet. He put it on. It made him feel a little different. I don't know about this, he said. The helmet wasn't as heavy as the one he had worn in the time of castles, but it was still pretty heavy. Well, I'm braver with mine on, said Annie. Jack smiled. He didn't know how Annie could be braver than she already was. Ready to row? She asked. Yup, said Jack. He was feeling braver himself. The wind picked up as Jack lifted his heavy oar over the side of the ship. He lowered it into the water, but the current was so strong that the oar was ripped from his hands. Jack fell over backward as his oar slipped into the sea. I lost my oar, Annie yelled. Jack looked up as rain started to fall. The sky was black. A gush of seawater poured over the side of the ship. Brrr, said Annie as she tried to stand. The black sky shook with thunder and flashed with lightning. Jack crawled to the side of the ship and pulled himself up. Another huge wave was coming right toward them. It's our darkest hour now, cried Annie. Get Brother Michael's book. Jack reached into his leather bag. He pulled out the jeweled book and held it up. Save us, Story, he cried. He looked at the sea again. What he saw made him scream. Rising from the oncoming wave was a giant sea serpent. 9. Sea Monster. The serpent's head rose higher and higher above the water. Jack couldn't move. He's beautiful, said Annie. Beautiful, cried Jack. The serpent's neck was as tall as a 2-story building. Its green scales were covered with sea slime. Go away, shouted Jack. No, stay, help us, shouted Annie. The great serpent glided closer to the ship. Jack ducked. Come on, said Annie. You can do it. Get us to shore before the ship sinks. Jack closed his eyes. He felt the ship jerk, then move forward. He looked up. They were gliding over the giant waves. Jack turned. The great serpent was pressing its long neck against the back of the ship, pushing it toward the shore. As the serpent pushed them, the wind grew calmer. The clouds lifted and the water glittered with sunlight. The rocky shore grew closer. Jack could see the treehouse on the ledge above it. Hurry, Annie called to the serpent monster. The great serpent gave the ship one last push. The ship swooshed onto a sandbar near the shore. Jack put the jeweled book carefully back into his bag. Then he and Annie climbed out of the ship onto the wet sand. They looked back at the sea. The great serpent was rearing its long neck into the air. Its scales glittered pink and green in the sunlight. Bye, shouted Annie. Thanks a lot. The monster seemed to nod at her. Then he dove into the sea and was gone. Jack and Annie headed toward the rocks. All of a sudden, Annie gasped. Uh-oh, she said, pointing to the top of the cliff. 2 Vikings were staring down at them. To the treehouse, cried Jack. The Vikings shouted and started down the steep stairs. Jack and Annie began scrambling up the rocks. They reached the treehouse and climbed inside. Jack grabbed the Pennsylvania book. Annie stuck her head out the window. Go home! Stop causing trouble! She yelled to the Vikings, who were almost to the ledge. Jack pointed at the picture of the Frog Creek woods. I wish we could go there, Jack shouted. Just as the Vikings reached the ledge, the wind began to blow. The treehouse started to spin. It spun faster and faster. Then everything was still. Absolutely still. 10. Sunrise. Boy, I'm glad to be back in my jeans, said Annie. Jack opened his eyes. He still felt damp. But he was glad to be wearing his jeans again, too. Welcome home, said Morgan. She was standing in the shadows. Are you all right? Of course, piped Annie. And we brought back the lost book, said Jack. He reached in his backpack and took out the jeweled book of Brother Michael. He handed it to Morgan. The enchantress sighed. She ran her hand over the sparkling cover. A great work of art, she said. Morgan then put the book next to the scroll from Roman times and the bamboo book from ancient China. I'm afraid the story you wanted is not all there, said Jack. Brother Michael didn't get the chance to finish it. Morgan nodded. I know, she said. Sadly, we have only bits and pieces of many wonderful old stories. What's the story about? Asked Annie. It's an ancient Irish tale about a great serpent named Sarph, said Morgan. He saved us by pushing our ship over the stormy waves. Annie said. Sarph was a huge, ugly monster, said Jack. Morgan smiled. Sometimes monsters can be heroes, she said. What about Vikings? Asked Jack. Oh, most definitely Vikings could be heroes too, she said. In fact, once the Vikings settled down, they became more than just a warrior people. They actually added a lot to civilization. We found civilization on our trip, said Annie. Yeah, said Jack. In the library of the monastery? Morgan smiled again. Their library was a light in the dark ages, wasn't it? She said. Jack nodded. He thought of Brother Michael and the other monks, making their beautiful books by candlelight. Thank you also for your great courage, Morgan said. You are both heroes, too. Jack smiled shyly. Go home now and rest, said Morgan. Bye, Jack and Annie said together. They started down the treehouse ladder. The sky was turning pink and gold. When they reached the ground, Morgan called out to them, Come back in 2 weeks. I need you to find one more lost book. Where is it? Said Jack. Ancient Greece, said Morgan. A place with the highest civilization, and the first Olympic Games. Oh, wow, said Annie. Jack was thrilled. He had always wanted to go to ancient Greece. Jack and Annie took off through the woods. The sun was rising when they got to their front porch. Annie opened the front door. She stuck her head inside and listened. Everything's quiet, she whispered. I think Mom and Dad are still sleeping. She moved quietly inside. Jack turned back to watch the red sun rise through a clear blue sky. He thought about how it was the same sun that had risen in Ireland over 1,000 years ago. Shine, O light of the sun, Jack whispered, on this day filled with wonder. Then he slipped inside his quiet house.